It all started with something so small that I could hardly believe it caused everything to go wrong. I was in the living room folding clothes when Ethan called from the hallway. "Sophia, can you help me with this?" I looked over and saw him by the stairs, having trouble with his belt. His khaki shorts were hanging loose and his belt was all tangled up. "Can you fix this?" "It's stuck or something?" he asked, walking towards me. "Sure," I said, putting the towels down. I went over to help, trying to untangle the belt from the buckle that was stuck. "Yeah, sorry," he said, holding his breath while I worked. When I finally got the buckle loose, his shorts fell down to his ankles. Everything seemed to stop. I couldn't help but look down, seeing more than I wanted to, before quickly looking away. Ethan just stood there, frozen, his hands held awkwardly in the air, his face turning bright red. Sorry," mumbled quickly, pulling his shorts back up. I stepped back, feeling embarrassed. "It's okay." "It happens," I said. "Yeah, thanks." For helping," he stuttered before rushing upstairs, leaving me alone, my heart racing. It had been an accident, just an awkward moment, but something felt different after that. The air felt tense, and I couldn't stop feeling like things had changed. We never talked about it, but from that day on, our relationship was never the same. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can keep sharing more amazing real stories like this one. Don't forget to watch the video all the way through and like it because this story is really interesting. Please hit the like button to show you're supporting me. My marriage to Michael wasn't like a fairy tale. It wasn't bad, but it was just a quiet, comfortable routine that had slowly lost its spark. We got married when I was 44 and he was 50, both of us having been through messy first marriages. Michael liked his habits, regular golf games, fishing trips, and work dinners kept him busy. I had learned to deal with the quiet between us, spending my time gardening, doing charity work, and keeping the house clean. Then Ethan moved in. He was Michael's son from his first marriage. He'd always been polite but distant. I'd only seen him a few times during the early years of my marriage, usually during holiday visits when he was still in college. He was shy, like a lot of young men are with new stepmothers. But now, 6 years later, the man who showed up at our door wasn't the same quiet teenager I remembered. Ethan had just graduated and was having trouble finding his way. His fine arts degree, which Michael didn't think was important, hadn't led to much success. Michael offered him a place to stay while he figured things out. I didn't have much say in the decision, but I didn't mind. The house was big enough, and it was nice to have someone around during the long hours Michael spent working or hanging out with friends. What I didn't expect was how much Ethan's presence would change things in the house. Ethan had a way about him, a charm that made people want to be around him. His dry sense of humor and bright smile filled the house in a way Michael never did. It started with little things. One morning, I was trimming the hedges when Ethan showed up with a cup of coffee, barefoot, and still half asleep. He leaned against the door, watching me with a lazy smile. "You're up early," I said. He shrugged and took a sip of his coffee. "Couldn't sleep. Plus, someone has to admire all the work you're putting in out here." I laughed and shook my head. "Don't let Michael hear you say that. He thinks this garden takes care of itself." "Michael doesn't notice much," Ethan said casually, but with a little bit of an edge. The comment surprised me, but I didn't ask him about it. Over the next few weeks, our talks got longer, and we started to get more comfortable with each other. Ethan would hang around the kitchen while I cooked, telling me stories about his college days, or asking for advice on job applications. One afternoon, I found him lying on the couch in the living room, sketching in his notebook. "Mind if I take a look?" I asked, pointing to the pad. He hesitated for a moment before handing it to me. The pages were filled with detailed pencil sketches, portraits, landscapes, and abstract designs that seemed so real. These are amazing, I said, truly impressed. Thanks, he said quietly. I just do it to pass the time. You should show these to someone, I suggested. A gallery, an art director. You have real talent, Ethan. He smiled slightly and met my eyes. You're the first person who said that. His words lingered in the air, and for the first time, I felt something shift inside me, something I couldn't quite understand. Then, the belt incident happened, and things started to fall apart. For days, the air between us felt heavy with tension that neither of us knew how to handle. I tried to avoid being alone with him, but the house was too quiet and too small for that. We kept running into each other. One evening, I was washing the dishes when Ethan walked into the kitchen, his hair still damp from a shower. Sophia, he said quietly. I turned, my heart racing when I heard my name. Yes? I asked, unsure. I'm sorry about the other day. That was awkward, he said, his hands stuffed in his jeans pockets. It's fine, I said quickly, turning back to the sink. Let's just forget about it. I don't think I can, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I froze. His words felt heavy, and I could feel my chest tighten. I turned to face him, struggling with feelings I didn't know how to handle. Ethan, we can't, I started, but I couldn't finish. He stepped closer, his eyes locked on mine. I know, but I don't want you to think it didn't mean anything to me. The seriousness in his voice left me speechless, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then Michael's voice called from the front door, interrupting the moment. I'll be right there, I said quickly, turning away from Ethan. But even as I walked off, I knew something had changed. The next few days were filled with avoiding each other and sharing quick, secret glances. Michael stayed unaware, watching TV or going out with friends, leaving Ethan and me to deal with the tension between us. One afternoon while I was folding laundry, Ethan appeared in the doorway. Can we talk? He asked, his voice uncertain. I paused for a moment before nodding, closed the door. He stepped inside and shut it behind him. I don't know how to act around you anymore, he said, his voice raw. Ethan, we have to let this go, I said, my hands trembling. It was just a moment. But he stepped closer, not looking away. It wasn't just a moment, he said quietly. Not for me. It hit me, then it wasn't just a fleeting moment for me either. That night, Ethan and I shared something brief, but it meant a lot. It wasn't planned, but it happened. As I pulled away, I felt the weight of what we'd just done. This can't happen again, I told him. He nodded, but I saw in his eyes that he wasn't sure we could let it go, and honestly, neither was I. The days that followed were full of quick glances and an uncomfortable feeling growing between us. Ethan and I tried to act like nothing had changed, but the tension was hard to ignore. Every word, every look, felt like it meant something we weren't ready to talk about. Michael, though, stayed unaware, focused on his work, hobbies, and friends. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing. The more I tried to ignore it, the harder it became to pretend it wasn't there. The second time something happened, it was in the garden. I had spent the morning taking care of the roses, enjoying the warmth of the sun on my back when Ethan showed up behind me. You're always out here, he said, his voice breaking the silence. It's peaceful, I answered, not turning around. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. I think you like avoiding me. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? He asked softly, but with a sense of certainty. I turned to face him, and in that moment, there was no holding back. We shared something unexpected, and suddenly, everything between us changed. What started as a few quick, silent moments of connection slowly grew into something we couldn't ignore anymore. At first, we were careful, looking for ways to spend time together without anyone noticing. But as time went on, the pull between us grew stronger, and it became harder to resist. One evening, when Michael was out, Ethan and I ended up in the library. I pretended to organize the shelves, my hands shaking as he stood behind me. "You're shaking," he murmured, his breath warm against my neck. "I'm fine," I said, though my voice gave me away. He placed his hands on my shoulders and gently turned me to face him. "You don't have to be afraid." "I'm not afraid of you," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm afraid of what this could mean." His gaze softened, and he cupped my face in his hands. "Then stop thinking about it. Just be with me." The weight of his words hung in the air, and in that moment, I couldn't find the strength to argue. Instead, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't felt in years alive, connected and deeply torn. We kept everything a secret, and every moment with him felt like breaking free from the quiet life I had gotten used to. But the fear of being caught was always there, just lurking in the background. Michael stayed busy with work, unaware of what was happening in the house. But as Ethan and I grew closer, it became harder to keep everything hidden. One afternoon, as Ethan and I sat together in the living room, Michael came home earlier than expected.
"Sophia?" he called from the hallway. My heart raced, and I quickly moved to the other side of the room. "In here," I called, trying to keep my voice steady. Michael walked in, glancing between the two of us, but didn't seem to think much of it. "Didn't realize you'd have company," he said casually. "Just catching up," Ethan replied smoothly. Michael nodded, but gave me a long, lingering look as he walked away. It was subtle, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in how he saw us. The cracks started to show. Michael's quiet questions about Ethan and me spending time together, Ryan's comments, and the weight of our secret all began to feel like too much. Every moment with Ethan became riskier, more uncertain. The tension kept growing, and the weight of what we were doing seemed to hang over us. But no matter how risky it became, I couldn't bring myself to let go of the connection we had. I just couldn't walk away. One afternoon, as we sat in the living room, Claire spoke up. "Michael doesn't talk much about his personal life, but I get the feeling that things haven't been perfect between you two." I stiffened, my fingers tightening around the teacup in my lap. "Every marriage has its challenges," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Claire's smile was too sweet, almost too perfect to feel genuine. "Of course," she said, "but I'm sure it helps having Ethan around. He seems so helpful." The way she said it made my heart race and panic flooded my chest. I tried to stay calm, but her words hit me hard. Then there was Ryan, Ethan's best friend, who had always been blunt, sometimes rude. Now his comments were even sharper. "You've been spending a lot of time with Sophia," Ryan said one evening, sitting on the patio with Ethan, beers in hand. Ethan shrugged, keeping his tone casual. "She's my stepmom. Of course we talk." "Yeah, but it's not just that, is it?" Ryan pressed, his eyes narrowing. Ethan's grip on his bottle tightened. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying you're acting strange," Ryan replied. "And I think it's more than just work stuff. Something else is going on, and I think it involves her." Ethan stood up suddenly, the chair scraping loudly against the stone. "You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped. Ryan narrowed his eyes. "Don't I?" The tension in the house became unbearable. Every moment with Michael felt like walking a tightrope, and every visit from Claire felt like a test I wasn't sure I could pass. Ethan, too, was becoming bolder, his frustration with the secrecy growing, and I could feel the pressure building. One evening, as we sat in the library, Ethan turned to me, his expression hard. "I can't keep doing this," he said. "Ethan, we have to be careful," I replied, my voice trembling. "Careful isn't enough," he shot back. Ryan's suspicious, Claire's sniffing around, and Michael's not as clueless as you think. I looked away, feeling tears sting my eyes. What are you suggesting? That we stop? Ethan moved closer, his voice softening. You know I can't do that. But we need to figure out what we're going to do because this isn't sustainable. The breaking point came during a dinner party Michael insisted on hosting. Claire was there, along with a few of Michael's colleagues. Ryan showed up too, invited by Ethan. The evening started out normally polite conversation, laughter, and clinking wine glasses. But as the night went on, the atmosphere began to change. So, Sophia, Claire said, her voice sharp against the backdrop of chatter. How do you keep yourself occupied with Michael gone so often? I froze. Her question carried an implication I wasn't ready to face. The usual things, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Gardening, reading, helping Ethan with a few projects. Claire's smile became sharper. You must be very close then. Across the table, Ryan raised an eyebrow, his gaze flicking between Ethan and me. Yeah, Ethan's been spending a lot of time here lately, he said. I guess it makes sense. Sophia's pretty easy to talk to. The room went quiet. Michael looked between us, his expression unreadable. Claire sipped her wine, a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. Ethan stood up suddenly, excusing himself, and the tension in the air was thick. I think I'll check on him, I said quickly, standing up. I found Ethan pacing in the garden, the soft glow of the patio lights casting long shadows. This was a mistake, he said as I approached. What was? I asked, my heart racing. All of it, he replied, his voice tight. Letting Ryan come here pretending everything's fine. It's not, Sophia. It's fallen apart. I reached for him, brushing my hand against his arm. We'll figure it out. He looked at me, desperation in his eyes. How? Because I'm running out of ways to hold this together. Before I could respond, we froze at the sound of footsteps on the gravel. Michael stood at the edge of the garden, his figure outlined by the soft light. What's happening here? He asked, his voice quiet but serious. The big moment was coming, and all the secrets we had kept hidden were about to come out. Michael stood at the edge of the yard, his body stiff and his face hard as he watched us. The silence felt really long. Ethan and I stayed still, not sure what to do next. It felt like his stare was too much to handle. What's going on here? Michael asked again, his voice even colder. I opened my mouth, but I couldn't say anything. Ethan and I looked at each other for a moment, and I could see he was scared. We were just talking, I said, trying to smile and keep my voice calm. Nothing's wrong. Michael's eyes moved back and forth between us, his face hard to read. Funny how you two always have so much to talk about, he said, his voice sharp like he didn't trust us. Ethan stood up straighter, his teeth clenched. Is there a problem, Michael? Michael stepped closer, a cold smile on his face. I don't know. Should there be? The air between us felt heavy, and the tension grew with every second. My heart was beating fast. Michael wasn't just guessing anymore, he knew. He had figured it all out. Ethan paused, then nodded, turning to leave. I'll go inside, he said, his voice tight. No, Michael ordered, his voice cold. You stay right here. Ethan stopped, but he didn't move. Michael looked at me again, his eyes cold as ice. Can you explain why my wife and son are sneaking around in the garden during a dinner party? I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I was frozen, too shocked to speak. The heaviness of the moment weighed me down. Michael's voice broke the silence again, full of doubt. The next day, Michael was colder than ever toward me. His short words and icy looks made it clear he wasn't going to forget what had happened. He tried to stay away from me, but it only seemed to make things worse. Claire, of course, saw a chance to get involved in the mess. I couldn't help but notice how awkward things were last night, Claire said, sipping her coffee in the kitchen. Her voice sounded fake, like she was pretending to care. "It was just a misunderstanding," I said, trying to sound casual and not upset. Claire tilted her head, her smile too sweet to be real. "Of course. But, Sophia, you should be careful. How people see things can be dangerous, especially in situations like this." My stomach sank. Her words didn't feel like a warning, they felt like a threat. I saw the smug look in her eyes, and it made me shiver. Later that night, Michael called me into the study. He seemed calm, but there was something unsettling about how still he was. "I've been thinking," Michael said as he leaned back in his chair. "Maybe it's time for some changes." "Changes?" I asked carefully, my heart dropping. "Ethan's been here long enough," Michael said, his voice relaxed. "I think it's time he moved out and found his own place." I was shocked. "Michael, he's still figuring things out. He needs more time." "He can figure it out somewhere else," Michael cut me off, his voice hard. This isn't up for discussion. The tension kept building as Michael made it clear he was determined to get Ethan to leave. The moment we'd been avoiding finally happened when I told Ethan. His reaction was intense. "He's kicking me out?" Ethan said, his voice full of shock. "Because of what? A conversation in the garden?" "He's suspicious," I said, trying to calm him down. Ethan shook his head. He thinks something's going on, doesn't he?" "That's his problem, not ours." I grabbed his arm, trying to calm him. "We knew this might happen. We can't let it get worse." Ethan was angry. "He's not doing this because he's suspicious. He's doing it to control you, and I won't let him." The night Michael told Ethan to leave was the night everything changed. Michael's voice was cold and firm, and his words left no room for argument. "You have a week to pack your things," Michael said calmly during dinner. Ethan slammed his fork onto his plate and stood up suddenly. "You don't get to tell me when I leave," he yelled. "This is my house," Michael answered, his voice ice cold. "And I won't put up with this anymore." Ethan's anger grew. "Put up with what? Me being here? Or me getting closer to Sophia than you ever could?" The room went quiet. My blood turned cold as Michael's face grew darker, and I could feel the weight of his glare. He stood up slowly, his voice now low and threatening. "Get out of this house before I make you regret it." That night, I found Ethan in his room, packing his suitcase. He was still angry, and so was I. "You can't let him win," Ethan said, his voice full of frustration. "This isn't about winning," I said quietly. "This is about surviving." Ethan's eyes burned with determination. "You don't have to stay here. You don't have to stay with him." "I don't have a choice," I whispered, tears filling my eyes. "There's always a choice," Ethan said, stepping closer to me. "Come with me." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I thought about it, the chance to leave everything behind and start over somewhere far away. But the reality of what that would mean hit me all at once. I shook my head. "I can't," I said, my voice breaking. Ethan's eyes softened, but he nodded. "Then I'll go," he said quietly. But this isn't over. The next morning, Ethan was gone. Michael didn't say a word to me, and I spent the day walking around the empty house feeling lost in the silence. But the biggest shock came that evening when I found a note slipped under my bedroom door. "You think you've won, Michael, but you don't know the truth." "I'll make sure you do, Claire." My hands shook as I read the note. Claire knew she had seen or overheard something, and now she was using it against me. The note felt like a ticking bomb in my hands, and I stood there, frozen, reading the words over and over as they blurred in front of me. The next day, I went straight to Claire. I cornered her in the kitchen, my voice shaking as I held out the note. "What is this?" I asked. Claire didn't flinch. She leaned casually against the counter, a small smirk on her face. "Exactly what it says. Michael deserves to know the truth, don't you think?" "There's nothing to tell," I said quickly, though my voice wavered. Claire raised an eyebrow, her look full of fake sympathy. "Oh, Sophia, you don't really believe that, do you? I've seen the way you and Ethan look at each other. I'm not blind. My heart tightened, and I stepped closer, lowering my voice. If you think you can use this against me, you're wrong. I won't let you tear my family apart. Claire laughed softly, shaking her head. Tear your family apart, Sophia? You've already done that. I'm just speeding up what's already happening. Before I could say anything, I heard Michael's voice coming from down the hall. Claire's smile grew. Don't worry, she whispered. I'll handle the timing. That evening, Michael was quieter than usual, his mood tense as he picked at his food. Claire had left hours ago, but it still felt like she was there, hanging over us. The silence between Michael and me felt heavy. Finally, Michael put down his fork and looked at me. Sophia, is there something you want to tell me? He asked, his eyes narrowing. I froze, my heart racing. I forced a smile. What do you mean? Michael leaned back in his chair, watching me closely. You've been acting off lately, and then there's Claire making hints about things I don't get. If something's going on, now's the time to tell me. I struggled to keep my calm. Michael, there's nothing going on. Claire is just trying to cause problems. You know how she is. Michael stared at me for a long time before nodding slowly. I hope you're right, he said, his voice carrying a warning. Because if I find out otherwise… He didn't finish, but I knew exactly what he meant. The pressure was building. That night, as I lay in bed, sleep wouldn't come. My mind raced with thoughts. Claire's threat felt heavy, and Michael's growing suspicion was like a ticking time bomb. Just as I was starting to drift off, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I grabbed it, my heart racing as I read the message. Meet me tomorrow noon at the park by the bridge. Ethan. The next day, I left the house, telling Michael I was running errands. When I got to the park, Ethan was waiting by the bridge, his hands in his jacket pockets. You shouldn't have contacted me, I said as I walked up, my voice shaking. I didn't have a choice, he answered, frustration in his eyes. Claire came to see me. What? I gasped, my heart sinking. She knows? Ethan nodded. She knows everything, Sophia. And she's using it to get to Michael. My stomach turned. What did she say to you? She wants me to confess, he said with bitterness. She wants me to tell Michael the truth. She's playing both of us, Sophia. I shut my eyes, feeling the weight of it all hit me all at once. We're running out of time, I whispered. Ethan took my hand, his touch helping me stay calm. Then we have to act before she does. We value your opinion in comment section. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.